This episode of Archispeak is sponsored once again by Arcat, and of course, we love hearing what Arcat has to say, so listen to this. Your boss asks you to put together the CAD details for your firm's next project. What's your next step? Is it using a basic internet search only to find outdated or incompatible details? Grabbing the details from the last project and hoping they fit?
There's an easier, faster, and less stressful way to get the information you need. Arcat.com. Arcat has over 15,000 CAD details based on real manufacturers' products and powerful search engine to find the right one. Best of all, it's free, and you don't even need to register. Just go to arcat.com and start downloading the CAD details you need.
And this episode is also sponsored by BQE Core. BQE Core puts business intelligence, time and expense tracking, billing, project management, and accounting together on one intuitive, powerful platform. Whether you're at the office, at home, or on site, Core allows you to seamlessly monitor projects and tasks, track time, send invoices, and get groundbreaking insights. Make work easy and get your fully functional 15-day trial of Core by going to bqe.com/core.
Welcome to Archispeak, the podcast that talks about what it's like to work in the profession of architecture.
Welcome to episode 134 of the Archispeak podcast. I'm Neil Pan.
I'm Evan Troxel.
And I'm Cormac Phelan.
So what have you guys been, what have you been working on? What are you up to?
Well, the fun thing about projects when they're coming to the end is, everybody's starting to scramble to, you start getting bombarded with more and more questions, realizing that people are finally working on things.
Yeah, deadline.
But mine's a little bit different now because I'm getting bombarded by questions from the contractors because, and I think we may have talked about this a while ago, that, the project is still in design. Well, it's still in construction documents. We've got a couple more months to go. In fact, 2 to be exact, with at time of recording, not time of airing, but is time of recording, and put out a early bid package for steel and concrete and things like that. And so as we're going through the questions and the RFI questions and things like that from the contractor for the steel, we're realizing just how much we've got to still continue to coordinate and potentially even still design with the steel package that is in the hands of the contractor. And it's just, we've talked about it in the past, and we were talking about it kind of pre-show about the future of construction and stuff. And, one of the, methods is, this fast tracking that we all have probably experienced and love so much. It's
the future, man.
Sometimes this hyper intensive scheduling, because people don't seem to understand, just like we talk about that people don't understand the value of, a well-designed building. Sometimes people don't even understand that, construction takes time, especially, and sometimes it's at the detriment of the normal project process. And it's just, it's one of these things that, right now, I'm contending with, it's like the last project I had, we bid it out. We bid out the GMP at 50% CDs. And, it plagued me throughout the whole thing because, there were still decisions being made by the university, that kept affecting things throughout. So post GMP, there were still questions to be asked and questions to be answered that kept kind of just up and down, and it just kept affecting the construction schedule. It kept affecting the construction budget, and I'm hoping that this isn't going to be more of the same. And I don't necessarily think it is. I think this one the great thing about it is that we've had the CM on board the entire time, and we have, rather than just diving straight into things where we've got a lot of design assist partners that are also going to be the contractors, the prime contractors for whether it's glazing, precast, all these other things. And so it's a little bit different than projects in the past that have fast tracked. But, it's just, I can't help but think that, if this is the way things are moving, then we need to, what's your favorite saying, Evan? Click faster?
Yeah, click more faster.
Yeah, click more faster.
More faster.
That's kind of where we're going to have to go is, a more, how do you get quicker?
Yeah.
How do you get quicker?
The computer makes the decisions for you. That's how.
And that's a scary thought in its own right there.
There was a thread going on the Entree Architect community on Facebook about that whole, how do you track your time? Don't people understand that it takes time to design, and how come it's taking so long? And it was interesting because one of the guys said, I was actually brought in as an expert witness for an architect who was being sued for $12 million. And he ended up going back and going through all the records of all the different decisions that were made, and was able to get that settlement down to $37,000 or some odd number like that from $12 million. And this architect was nagging this other architect about the time he was spending going through the records. He's like, did I mention I got him out of $12 million? Right. and so it's interesting because like we're guilty of doing this to ourselves, not let alone clients and contractors and all this crazy scheduling that we have to deal with.
I think I saw the thread, but I completely missed it only because I'm living my own thread right now.
Yeah, right.
So you're saying that the architect the
one that was telling this story,
whose ass was saved,
right? He was
complaining that the other architect who was saving him, was spending too much time saving him.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. Okay, so you know what? We get what we deserve then.
We see this all the time, right? We see clients and where, especially for smaller projects, I would think, where, residential, this is probably happens quite often. You send a bill to a client and then they want to see how you spent all that time, and then you have to go spend a bunch of time to justify how you spent the time. And it's this crazy vicious cycle that we get stuck in. And the whole premise is that we need to move faster, right? But then there's this whole thing going on where it's like, okay, now show me how you spent that 5 minutes. Why did you bill me for a 6-minute phone call? It is pretty crazy. It's hard. It's hard to deal in the service industry when it comes to stuff like this because there's this constant pressure to perform faster because we've talked about the drive-through mentality before, right? Like, I just want to go straight to window number 2 without paying at window number 1 because the project should be done, and it's because of there's so many factors out there in the real world where people, the real world is in podcasting, air quotes, right? HGTV. I saw them turn that house around in 7 days, right? And so that becomes people's reality. And that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with. And they don't realize, and I don't think this, I talk about this in my class now, we worked on this project for 5 years, and people, their minds are blown. Like they are becoming architects, and they don't even realize how much time it takes to work on these projects.
The thing that kills me is that people's perception, let's go back to that HGTV perception, that people watch that and they say, well, they sat down with that family on day 1, and then the morning of day 2, they walked in with a completely set of rendered plans, and
Exactly.
in a 3D model and everything else. And so why does it take you so long? I'm like, because did you notice that in the background when they first met, there was snow on the ground? and now it's a fully bloomed
It's called editing.
Because the 6 months was in between those 2 days.
Yeah.
It just, no one gets that. No one gets that, they just started building. Well, not really. They had to pull permits, and to pull permits, you need this and you need that. And you got to go through a whole bunch of hoops. And, did you notice that this house was in a historic district? So guess what that means? That's another 6 months worth of just talking. I was about to say litigation, but not really litigation. Just going through the whole process of getting approved by the, historic district.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that we could point to kind of create Okay, so have you ever written a book? No, do books just pop out of authors overnight? Right? Like, there's a lot of different analogies we could draw. Have you ever done this? Have you ever designed a car? Have you ever built a car? Like we're so used to just buying things. People are so used to buying things.
Instant gratification.
They don't look at what it took to get there and how long it took to get there. It's interesting to think about that kind of stuff.
I was reading an article about, how over the course of the past few decades, how that we've been pushing for this, you got to get your college degree, that the U.S. is in dire need of tradesmen. Like, that's like the no shit. Right. That's like the no shit statement of the century. But what I think that's done is we've lost our concept of making,
of what it takes to do the work.
Yeah. I mean, we used to watch our parents come home.
We're guilty of that by putting lines on a paper
absolutely.
And not understanding how those 2 things or 3 things or 4 things actually go together.
True, absolutely. Yeah, and honestly, Revit's not helping. It's just like, well, so tell me about this wall. It's becoming much, much better now. Where people are becoming far more savvy
generic wall,
and understanding.
Cormac.
But yes, exactly. Well, it's a 6-inch generic wall. What does that mean? Generic? Yeah. So how do you build a 6-inch generic wall?
It's filled with Cheetos. Yeah.
If it were
tonight was the State of the Union, right?
Speaking of Cheetos, yes. No, actually, it was Auburn basketball.
Okay.
They beat Mississippi.
Oh, okay.
There. How's that?
That was a good save.
Yeah, I was going to say, we'll completely get off of
good save.
Of that. War Eagle, though. How? Yeah. Neil, what you got going on, man? Did you fall asleep? Bueller?
Yeah. Exactly.
Nothing? You ain't got anything?
I got nothing.
To kind of throw in similarly to what you were saying about bidding projects at 50% CDs to come up with the GMP to go out, there's lots of reasons for all this. And
designed to fail.
Well, one of the challenges that we're facing is that, as you mentioned, Cormac, during the rest of the project, as you're finishing drawings or going into the building permit process, there's things that come up, sometimes unforeseen, unknown, things you didn't anticipate, lots of things that can happen on a project that suddenly get added to a project. Or, in one case, the project I'm working on is required. It's kind of a generic requirement for any remodels or new buildings that they have to underground utilities.
Yeah.
And on a project I'm working on, the utilities are in an alley, the telephone poles, that is. And the telephone poles serve a residential neighborhood on one side and apartment buildings on the other. And so one of the comments we got back from the city was, well, you have to underground your utilities. And mind you, this is an affordable project that the city's actually kicking in money on. And so we came back to them and, basically said, well, that's nice. We would, everybody would like to do that. But if we were to underground our utilities, the poles don't go away because the poles serve the neighborhood on the other side of the block.
I've seen this.
behind this alley, right?
I've seen this many times, right? Yeah, you just underground it for your block.
Well, it's not even this block. It's basically we could underground our service through the alley, but the poles would still stay there because there's no way we're going to underground on the other side of the block. I mean,
no way you're paying to retrofit,
I don't even know how that would happen because you'd have to underground across people's property, right? And to get to the other side of the street. I don't even know how it would happen. Anyway.
Is this a chicken joke?
No, it's yeah. Anyway, so
this is real.
The city came back and basically said, okay, well, you don't have to underground, but we're going to charge you a fee for the lineal feet from the pole to your service, to basically a fee you have to pay for not undergrounding.
Like a fine.
Well, it's like a fine, but I mean, it's...
This is your variance fee, right?
And I don't know. I shouldn't... I understand where they're coming from. The city has a checkbox, and if they can't fill the checkbox, there has to be some way that they can justify not doing it, right? I mean,
penance. You have to pay the penance.
The city engineer or some staff engineer can't just say, yeah, that makes no sense. Of course you don't have to do this. Let's just move on. They can't do that, right? I mean, they don't have the authority to do that. So they have to have some way.
Here.
What's that? Yeah,
it
yeah,
says
exactly.
Right here,
says
Neil,
you
right
have
on
to
this,
do it.
There's a checkbox.
That's right.
And if I can't check that box, everything's ruined.
Yeah, because when we made that rule, it had to apply to everybody 100%.
Right. Well, and I get that. I mean, you can't just make every exception in the world. I get it. But there just seems to be this inability when you're working with a city sometimes that to just make a decision that makes sense, that works for people. And I get it. Maybe you have to make certain decisions to force developers to do things. And I get that, but it just seems a little crazy at times. So anyway, the point of that whole story is to basically come back to what you were just mentioning at the start, Cormac, is that because of these unforeseen things, we have an affordable project that's going for tax credit applications and all of this stuff. And basically a whole lot of money's been added to the project because of things just unknown.
Just sounds like you guys paid through the project what the city was actually going to be paying you.
Well, I don't know about that, but...
Well, you said that the city was going to be kicking in money?
Yeah, there's
well, now you're kicking
funds.
money, but you're kicking money back to the city to pay all of these impact fees. And now now you've covered their cost.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, I don't know the all of the numbers here, but it just seems that our biggest problem is that ultimately the project's well over budget now, and not due to everything, but due to high costs here in Northern California and probably in many places in the country or around the world right now for construction. Is that the project is being stripped. I mean, we're literally going almost line item by line item. What things can we either strip, change? All of the niceties about the project have been taken away. And these are the realities. I get that. It's like, if we don't do this, we don't have a project. Mm-hmm. So it's a little frustrating, but it's all being driven by... Here's this GMP based on basically an incomplete set of drawings because they haven't gone through the building department process. But going back to what you said, construction takes time, or the planning for the construction takes time. If we had taken a little more time, maybe that would have made a difference. But ultimately, I think you could take as much time as you want, and there's still going to be things that crop up that you don't know about. You have to deal with that cost more money.
Unforeseen,
right? Yeah. Unforeseen. So that's what I'm doing.
Did you guys really have the upfront knowledge that the city was going to, kind of impose some form of impact fee on you because you basically are following existing conditions? And you decided that, I mean, and I don't know if you guys, yeah, I'm sure you guys probably sat down with them during the, code review process and everything.
Well, I mean, there's things you can ask and there's things you just don't know about, things that might be
Right,
buried
right,
in a municipal code that don't crop up until later in the process. And somebody goes, oh, wait a minute, there's this. And, oh, okay. I don't research the entire, I mean, maybe we should. Maybe actually this has happened twice, a couple of projects where there's been some rule or regulation buried in a municipal code that we didn't know about. And it's kind of come up a couple of different times over the past year or two on projects.
Here's the problem. You can't ever track down all those damn overlay codes that,
Right.
You can go through all of your zoning regulations. You can go through all of your building code regulations and all that other stuff and think that you've got everything covered. But then there's that one little thing just hiding in a municipal code or some deed covenants or some stupid, whatever that just pops up and says, "Hey guys,
Yeah.
I'm going to screw your project up."
It was a number of different things. I mean, there's also, we also got hit with actually it's I'm not sure if it's in their municipal code. It's something that recently passed within the last year or two that all R2 buildings, of which our building is, of this type, have to have sprinklers by, originally it was 2020. Their city council extended that date last year to 2022. So that basically every building in this city has to have sprinklers installed.
Now, let me ask you, is that on new construction or is that
all
buildings? So retrofit.
R2 buildings.
So you have to go back and retrofit them.
Whether you are doing a remodel or a repair, it doesn't matter. If you do nothing to your building, you have to add sprinklers to it by 2022. This is a cost that, and there's huge fines that the city is going to levy.
I think you should just tear those buildings down instead.
Well, I don't know I don't know what's going to happen here, but that was something that came up. One of our buildings does not require it. It's a 1960 building. It doesn't have sprinklers. The remodel doesn't require us to have the sprinklers, and now we have to do it. So now we're adding sprinklers to this building, and there's an unforeseen cost that we didn't know about.
That's not cheap either. Jeez.
No, it's not. No. It's not cheap. So going back to what you had started us off with, that's something we've been dealing with here the last week and a half.
See what you look forward to as an architect, kids.
Yeah,
the fun stuff.
Almost daily conversations between us, the developer, in this case, our client, and the contractor who's been selected for the project, going through and like, well, we can save $2,500 here and $9,000 there, and
stripping it.
Yeah, it's a struggle, and so this is architecture, right? I mean, we're trying to get a building built.
Oh, that's painful.
Yep.
Or trying to get a building retrofitted, in this case, remodeled. So that's my life lately. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing.
All right. Well, I have nothing I could talk about. If I did, I would bore you all to death. So, okay, I have two.
We know that's not true.
We've mentioned two topics in the past, Neil. I'm going to give you the choice to pick which direction to go here. All right. So we can either follow up on the strategic planning that you got to be a part of.
Oh yeah.
Or
about that. Yeah.
You can talk about.
I don't want to put Cormac to bed or sleep.
I'm sorry. Wait. What were we talking about?
The demolition of the Frank Lloyd Wright building.
Well, let's talk about this Frank Lloyd Wright thing, because it's up on my screen right now. We can come back to strategic planning at another time. So what we're referring to is recently, as in, I don't know, about 2.5 weeks ago, Frank Lloyd Wright's second to last building was just demolished in Montana. So this was, this was
the Lockridge Medical Clinic.
Thank you. Lockridge Medical Clinic. And it was, designed in 1958, realized in 1959.
After he died.
After he died, yes. But it's been a number of different things over the years.
They tore it down because they had to put sprinklers in it.
I was gonna say because of the current
was
codes,
cheaper.
they had to exactly.
That's great. Yeah.
And they had to put HVAC in it, and then they realized it's like these ceilings are too low. We can't do anything about it.
It's
Gotta
Montana.
tear it down.
I mean, it does have a fireplace for central heat, I think.
Yeah.
Did have a fireplace.
Exactly. So what we're talking about is that the developer who owned the building had he had plans to basically demo it and put up a 3-story building, but gave the option of somebody buying the building from him for 1.7 or some.
Yeah.
Let me see.
$1.7 million.
And, through the course of the year that the negotiations for that $1.7 million sale price was going on, he basically just kind of kept moving forward with his plans to demolish it. And the Frank Lloyd Wright Building Conservancy ultimately raised the money, paid him, or at least made an offer to him at the 11th hour, and I thought it was interestingly disingenuous from the guy's lawyer that says this building has been for sale for over a year. It's a bit frustrating that these people are just rushing in to get things done, and we've had it posted for sale. It's just like for people like the Conservancy. Raising $1.7 million to purchase a building, that's a huge undertaking.
You mean that takes
donation.
Time? Does that take time too?
That
Yes, it
takes
does.
time.
You don't just pick that up in the drive-through?
Yeah, those are donations that, they're people. This, the Conservancy does not have money, $1.7 million just jingling around in their pocket.
Yeah.
I mean, they've got to go through, they've got to, apply for grants if they want to try to do that, or, go through and, just do the grassroots effort of raising the money. And so, that takes time and effort. And, this guy clearly reading this article, I mean, there was nothing about this guy's intentions that were honorable. I mean, he purely wanted to just demo this thing, and he just dangled it around as a kind of a PR thing. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to give them time to do this. No, all he's going to do is he knows that he's got to wait for his architect to, finish the plans for his, 3-story, multi-use building, and so that'll take some time. It'll go through all the permitting process. All the while, I'll say, big, huge, podcast air quotes here, that I'm going to, make this effort to go ahead and sell this building off to, the Conservancy or, anybody who wants to save this building, they can do it. Just give me the money. And when they finally said, okay, we got the money, here you go. It's like, no, you missed the deadline. Sorry. And the thing that, and we'll post a link to a Facebook account that had the late night, in the middle of the night, in the middle of the dead of winter in Montana, of all places. So it's cold. They're out there demoing this building, so there's no one who can see them doing this. It's his right to do it. It's
like a video straight out of Cops.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Put the Cops theme song behind that.
But it was just, so here's where all of that, is leading to the question of, should these buildings, no matter what, be saved? And I don't know if that's actually the right way to phrase that question, but, here's the second to the last building that Frank Lloyd Wright ever did. It was built posthumously, and, like plenty of other buildings were, but here's a building by a famed architect. Should it be saved? There are tons and tons of famed architect designed buildings being demolished on a daily basis. Is it right? Is it wrong? Should we save it? I mean, what are you guys' thoughts? Because I've got plenty of thoughts on them, and I want to hear yours.
Well, what's interesting about this one in particular was that it's noted that it was listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and it was still torn down. So it's like there were no protections in place, and so I guess maybe that's the question is like, should some kind of protective measure be taken to actually put some teeth into this? Because it seems like even though that happened, I mean, it still got torn down.
Yeah.
So
and
how do you have teeth?
That's honestly the better question.
So yeah, because do these buildings add value to the heritage of architecture, or is it just because it was by this famous dude who, everybody in architecture knows who he is, but does everybody know who he is? Probably. I mean, he's probably the most well-known architect from the United States, at least. And most people who don't know jack about architecture know about Frank Lloyd Wright, at least know the name, and have probably even been in one of his buildings and found it to be interesting and probably inspiring. Like I'm just imagining like how many people have walked through the Guggenheim in New York, and I mean there's definitely less of that on the West Coast than there is, Chicago and East Coast stuff, but I would, Falling Water is but those are iconic. Like this is an office building, so there's a difference there, right? I mean, the only similarity is that they were designed by the same guy.
Well, I think you raise a really big question is if because I don't know if you've ever dealt with landmark buildings or anything like that. There are things that are on the register, but I mean, there are supposed to be some protections afforded this building,
right,
so that it could save it from, demolition. I mean, if it's something that's crumbling and it poses, a life safety issue, that's one thing. But if it's a squabble over cash and, this guy, clearly extended, I mean, it's hard to say, what the motivations other than just pure, financials. I mean, I think this guy was just, like, I don't care who designed this, it's in the way. I want it gone. There was a building in Sarasota, and it was a Ringling building. John Ringling, the founder of the Ringling Brothers circus, and he's Ringling College, and he's got a lot of historic homes and stuff down in Sarasota area, and there was a home that was connected to the Ringling family. It was one of their original houses, and the preservationists had been trying to save this thing. There was a construction of a high-rise hotel on the site, and they've been trying to save it, and so they had designed plans around saving it. But miraculously, in the middle of the night, somebody had broken into one of their front loaders and accidentally run into the building and knocked it over. And you just like, right, accidentally, again, big, huge, monstrous air quotes there, accidentally ran this over. No, it's in the way of progress, and you wanted to get rid of it. And the problem is that, there's bigger questions of like, what does this do? And you started talking about what does this do to, the fabric of, the city? I mean, is it, are you losing heritage? I mean, there's all sorts of like emotional things, like to me, I love the aesthetic, the eclectic aesthetic of cities. I mean, to me, that's the most interesting thing when they start tearing things down and it just becomes this big wall of glass, glass covered buildings and stuff like that. There's no character there.
Yeah.
Stucco and everything else. I mean, there's no character to it. We were actually driving,
it's generic.
we were driving in DC over the weekend, and my kids were like, hey, check that out, and I kind of like turned my head and I look over and I see these two buildings, and I didn't take a picture of them, but maybe I can find a screenshot of it. It was interesting because there was these two old, probably colonial era or just post-colonial era, buildings, row homes, and there's these brand new buildings built over the top of them.
Yeah.
And as ugly as the two buildings that were built over the top of them were, what I think was really interesting is the fact that they were still there, in that you're driving down and you're looking at a bunch of, mid-rise glass buildings, but in front of them are a row of old, 1700s, early 1800s buildings that are still there, that are still, part of the witness of, I've seen this city evolve.
Yeah.
And
it's a true symbol of the way cities develop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And to see things like that go, and, this is when I get like all touchy-feely about, preservation, and it's less about the, it being a registered building or anything. It's just the fact that, the building's already there. Let's talk about
finding a new use for it or something.
Find a new use for it, because it's already there. It's cheaper to go ahead and renovate. Sometimes it's cheaper to renovate. But and it's a famous building in it's Montana, and there's so few people, and wherever this particular thing is, where was the, help me out here, where was that building at? In Whitefish, Montana.
Yeah.
So how many people go to Whitefish, Montana to seek out, historic or good architecture? Probably no one, except for the people who know that there's a Frank Lloyd Wright building there, and they want to see as many, if not all, of the Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. And there's tons of those people out there that do that. I love going to, look at old Frank Lloyd Wright buildings. And, if I would have known that it was there, I would have probably wanted to, hey, I'm in Montana. I want to go see that building. Let's go see that building. So the first time, and so now I'm, contributing to the economy of Whitefish by going and seeing this building, probably having lunch there.
Yeah, but like speaking of the economy of Whitefish, there's no incentive for the city to keep this building. There is a lot of incentive to build a 3-story mixed-use stucco tower on this site instead, right? I think that there's so many competing interests. I think you kind of alluded to that earlier, Neil, when maybe before the recording started, but all these competing interests, it's so hard to kind of untangle all this stuff, like who's stepping on who and who's going around and behind the back and under and over and to make something happen. And a lot of it is economically driven, but not just on the side of the developer in this case. I'm assuming that there's other weird stuff going on too, because it's not like you can just go tear down any building you want whenever you want, right? Like there's more to it than that.
Now, I will say this, and let's be honest. Is this the best example of Frank Lloyd Wright's work?
Well, that's what I was trying to get at in the beginning, was like
No.
There definitely are some iconic Frank Lloyd Wright, and then there's a lot of mediocre stuff. I mean, you were talking about, adding the AC down to Florida
Southern College.
Yeah, right. And so technology's changed, needs have changed. There's lots of things that like there are definite reasons to keep iconic structures, but like I said, like this is just a little office building, and so
I was going to say, is this
right?
Is this an iconic Frank Lloyd Wright building, or is this just a Frank Lloyd Wright building?
Well, and it depends. It depends, right? Because the whole internet wants to weigh in on this subject, right? But the problem is like we don't live there. We've never been in this building. It's not our building. I would assume that there are people who live in Whitefish, Montana, who like they lost a piece of their soul Or maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I mean, it's hard to judge this kind of thing just on the internet. So,
Well, I mean, honestly, just looking at the photographs that are included in the article, and obviously we're going to be posting it up there, and I wish that there were more. But, it's a single structure. I mean, to me,
story.
I like it. Say again?
Single story.
Yeah. To me, I mean, I like it. I'm not a big fan of the over-decorated fascia that it's got going on, the little cornice work, but and what clearly looks like to be a added on mechanical screen of some form or something like that.
I think that's that clear story section in the middle, over the middle.
Center
space.
But what's sitting on top of the clear story is because it looks like you can see the planar element of the clear story, but then
I bet
looks
you're
like
right.
there's something sitting on top of that.
I bet it is a mechanical.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And so, overall, it's an okay building. I mean, is it what we think of, when we think of Frank Lloyd Wright? No, it's, in fact, to be quite honest with you, at first blush, and this is probably going to kill anybody who's like a Frank Lloyd Wright, fanatic, but it's not that good. It looks like, it would be done by one of his disciples, and not him. I mean, the interior is most certainly not, what I would think of as indicative to Frank Lloyd Wright. It's plain, it's boring, it's wood paneled with drywall. I'm assuming that's, been evolved over time, and,
exactly.
it's not the original. And even the, you can, it's going to sound horrible. You can almost see that it was like the last, one of the last buildings that he did, because it's not that, it's bad. It's not that, it's really not a good building. It's just an okay building. So the question is it that big of a loss that it's been demolished? Or is it that big of a loss because it's been demolished because it was a Frank Lloyd Wright building? I don't know. I'm torn. I'm really torn on this building, only because it's the detailing I've been in tons of Frank Lloyd Wright buildings, and the detailing just doesn't seem up to the par of what he what I've seen in the past, and it's just kind of
So you're saying he was phoning it in at this point in his career?
He was how old was he in 1958? Didn't he die at 176 or something like that?
Yeah.
He was up there.
Yeah.
Well, I think this draws a larger question here. Mm-hmm. And that larger question is just historical preservation in general, right? I think you said it nicely, which is, should we care about an office building that got torn down, or should we care about it because it's a Frank Lloyd Wright building that got torn down? And I think that's the critical aspect of this. Here in the town I live in, we have a historical preservation commission, one I've actually served on before.
Yeah.
And any building that's 50 years or older has to go through this commission to approve or disapprove any sort of modifications or demos and everything. And one of the criteria that we often use is what's the historical significance of the building? Are there, say, other buildings just like it? And that goes more for residential. In the case of my own house, I could easily point to, I think it was 3 or 4 other houses at the time that were identical to mine, built by the same person in 1950, the exact same floor plan. So it wasn't, in my case, when I tore mine house. Yeah, well, it was special to me, but other than there was no historical
Well, I'm just saying
significance.
architecturally.
Yeah, and architecturally there was no great significance to the building, and there were others just like it, so it wasn't like a one-off and something that was needed to maybe be thought of to preserve. So that was okay. So, okay, down it went. But I think in this case, whether it's a bad Frank Lloyd Wright building or not, I mean, not everything we do as architects is a home run, right? Not every project we do is an iconic Guggenheim-esque building of
Speak
some
for
sort.
yourself, but you're no Frank Lloyd Wright, Mr. Payne. This dude was the Babe Ruth of architecture right there.
I get. All right. So, I mean, I just think that should buildings in general be given some sort of consideration and perhaps protected, I think is the larger question here. It's certainly adding to this equation is the fact that this was designed by probably one of the most famous American architects who's ever lived. So should that have given it some sort of special protection so that it shouldn't have been torn down?
Frank Lloyd Wright would have just bitch slapped you.
Okay, explain.
One of the most, excuse me, the most. There is no one of.
Yes, all right, fair enough. I didn't want to. I was trying to avoid the emails or the tweets from other people saying that there were other famous American architects.
He was better. It was like, just, in Frank Lloyd Wright's mind, Frank Lloyd Wright was the best.
Of course. Well, we all think we're the best.
Well, unfortunately, I mean, you're putting this question out there, and the only the people who actually care about this stuff, and we know that that's not 100% of the people, right, have to put the money where their mouths are. And so if that's architects or enthusiasts or disciples of Frank Lloyd Wright or whatever it is, like they're the ones who are going to have to put the money up. And if they don't, there's got to be a timeline associated with this. It's not like the building could just sit there empty forever until somebody buys it who is going to take care of it and become that caretaker, that good Samaritan.
Throw something out here. So let's go back a couple thousand years. I mean, when
you were born?
Well, I was just like, I mean, was the Pantheon the best building in its area that, you know, maybe it deserved to be torn down for something else to be built there, right? I'm just throwing it out there. I mean, we don't know what might be historically significant in the future, right?
But see, that's a bad example only because
fair enough.
So only because in Italy and Europe and every other country that's not, you know, titled the United States of America, they actually build upon their history and keep their history as kind of intertwined with everything else. They don't mow it all over every 30 years and then rebuild and all this other stuff. I mean, you know, we have good examples, like saying in DC and everything else, of us sort of doing that a little bit. But for the most part, our thing is, you know, progress.
But
let's just keep up with
you're
progress.
You're looking through it with a lens of history. The advantage of the lens of history here, we only see what exists there because it's lasted this long, right? We don't know what other kind of crap was built and fell apart 2,000 years ago in Europe, right? I mean, I'm sure there were tons of things that we might consider special or really cool that are just gone today, right? Or gone even 1,000 years ago, it was gone. So nobody even knows what was there. So I'm just thinking that, well, I don't know. That's the thing I struggle with here is that I don't know the answer. Should every building over 50 years old, over 100 years old, over 1,000 years old be kept? Or should it be gone? Or should it be just looked at one by one? Is there one special thing about that particular building that should stay? That's the reason it should stay. And this one across the street's garbage and nobody cares about it. And we could tear that one down.
I mean, it's not even about like, you know, is this garbage or not garbage? I mean, you know, hell, I mean, what do they say about art? Beauty is in the eye of the beholder,
Sure.
And so everything, even you, Neil, are special to someone. but
Well, thank you, Corman.
I wasn't saying me. No.
That was the implication.
No, but I mean, I think Evan said it. That we grow, we develop, we change. Society changes and all that other stuff, and we basically, build to suit the what's going on in today's society. Whether or not we can reuse it is one thing. We can, most of the time, and usually when it's by the direction of an architect, it usually is let's look at a way to do an adaptive reuse on it rather than to tear it down or things like that. And in cases like this one, I mean, this was an anomaly because there really was no good reason to tear it down other than it seemed he was kind of spiteful to a lot of people who were telling him what to do. And I was going back and doing a little bit of research on this particular developer, and that's kind of his thing, is just he knows what's best because it's his money. He knows what's best for a town. And, there's been some things that, he's done in his past that seem noble to, preserve and kind of, but his idea is to kind of basically reshape this area into what he thinks is the right thing for the city. So it was purely a selfish, motive. The guy, had no intention of keeping the building around. He didn't care if it was Frank Lloyd Wright or Frank Lincoln Wright. Same guy, just to let you know. That's a question I want to know, is why did they change Frank Lincoln Wright to Frank Lloyd Wright? Why'd he do that?
Somebody on the internet will tell us.
Somebody on the internet, please tell me. I'm curious. But so he had no real interest in that. I go back and I look at a lot of the Detroit area stuff. I mean, you had Minoru Yamasaki, who was practicing in that area. You had Albert Kahn and all these other ones, and we've lost plenty of their early buildings and stuff. In fact, the Yamasaki's building the Twin Towers. I mean, that the pattern in the windows was very iconic. Him. Mm-hmm. And if you go and you look at all of these, a lot of buildings around the Detroit metro area and in the suburbs, you'll see buildings that have that window pattern, because that was kind of his thing. There's a building, there's kind of a test subject, or a scale model, I guess you can call it, of the Twin Towers. There's an office building on Jefferson in downtown Detroit, right on the water, that looks like a small scale figure of one of the Twin Towers. But where my wife grew up, she used to go to this movie theater that was designed by him, and it had the same kind of window patterning. It had this kind of screen that went over, kind of formed, a colonnade and all this other stuff that was kind of that same window patterning and stuff. And I loved the thing. It was quirky. It was weird. It was ugly, but it was cool. And it was leveled. And they haven't put anything back there. And I kind of feel bad that they leveled the thing, but, it had sat vacant for, over a decade. And
it just became a liability.
And it just, exactly. Yeah. And my wife asked this question, she asks me this question all the time, and I don't really know the answer to this. When somebody builds a building, whether it's got great historic significance or it's absolutely just nondescript and, nobody cares really about it one way or the other, when it's outgrown its use and people move out and it sits there vacant, she always asks me, why isn't it the responsibility of the person who owned it last, or the person who, possibly still owns it, or the person who built it, that if it sits dormant for 10 years, 15 years or something, shouldn't it be their responsibility to come back and either, demolish it or something because it's, causing blight? And it's a good question.
A blight fee.
Exactly. It would be interesting to kind of like ask that question to everybody. It's like, what do you do when a building is not used anymore? Do you just let it sit there and let, nature reclaim it? I love taking those photographs.
I can point at 5 different buildings that got built either right before the recession, during the recession, or after it that have never had one tenant in them.
Yeah.
That I drive by on my way to work.
And you got to ask, hell, during the recession, just before the recession, before I moved up here from Florida, this developer had all of these big, nice beachfront builder homes, all like, 5,000, 7,000 square foot homes, big, huge houses that were half built. They, had, some of them had siding on them, some of them didn't. Some of them were just, wrapped in building paper and had windows in them and everything else. But that was how they stood. And the last time I went there, and this was like, years and years after I had left, I went back and they're still there in the same condition. Mm-hmm. Just, some of them, the building paper is completely gone. Some of them have, kind of like, it's turned black and it was a white paper. Now it's a black paper. And it's, so you got to ask, is like, shouldn't there be some responsibility of the builder to like tear that stuff down? Or what do we just let, I worked on a new urbanist development that, the first phase was 500 acres. And so they went in and they put in, and this was just before the recession, they put in all of the underground utilities. They ran all of the electrical. They ran everything. They put in all of these beautiful brick roads and everything else, and the curbs were in there. And you could see all of the transformers getting ready for houses to occupy all of the sites. Nothing. It is now a decade later, and there has been nothing built on it.
Yeah.
And they're slowly being reclaimed. The nature is taking back over, and it's interesting to it's good anthropology exercise just to kind of like document all of the failed attempts at civilization. But and now I'm getting off on a weird tangent, but you just got to ask, it's like, what do you save, what don't you save, what and does it matter who it's by?
Yeah.
I'm sure honestly a question I really want to have a conversation, a bigger, broader one with more people. Neil, it interests me that you have been on, the Historic Preservation Commission, and you started to allude to like what you guys would allow, or like at least the process of, how if a building was going to be demolished. It's got to. If it meets all these criteria, did you guys just say, well, then sorry, no, you can't demolish this building. You have to do something else with it?
In my time, we were never faced exactly with that question. We were faced with sometimes remodels to more historic homes here in the area. And so they had to very carefully do what they were doing to make it work within the existing. We couldn't do anything like, we got into the Secretary of Interior standards and all of this stuff, and so that it got very complex sometimes. But we were never faced with a question of, I want to tear this building down, and we said no, you couldn't. Most likely, if that question had arisen, they might have abandoned the project before they ever brought it to the commission at that point. I don't know if that ever happened, because it would have to go through staff first. And so staff would do a preliminary evaluation and to see if it was necessary. Not every project was brought to us. So staff had the ability to make a decision on their own whether or not something was deemed significant enough to make it to the commission. And that was based on a lot of several different criteria, one of which was this historical report that was done. Some people in town complain about it. They say it's not perfect, but it's a very good historical record of all the homes and all the buildings in town that was done, I don't know, back in the 1980s, I think. It's a very good historical record to refer to. So if there was some significance to a building, it was rated back at the time. And so we oftentimes would use that report to go back and say, okay, was this home in that report? Was it mentioned? What was the historical significance of it? And so that was used as a document to kind of guide us a little bit.
Well, I mean, like, let's use the project I worked on in Annapolis Elementary School. It was these two buildings that were not on the historic register for all of Annapolis, or at least all of the downtown region of Annapolis is part of a historic district. And even though those two buildings were within the historic district, they were deemed as non-contributing buildings to the historic district. And so technically if they needed to be torn down, they could be torn down because they were non-contributing. But, the school system decided that they didn't want to tear it down because it would be a lot cheaper. There's some big, huge, monstrous air quotes, because after, 5 years of going through that building, I question whether or not it was cheaper to save the buildings than it was to demolish them. It was an absolute blast to go through the project and do the project. But looking at, like, these buildings were built so wrong. There was no footings. It was it was laden with asbestos all over the place. There was 100 and however many, 100 and I guess 20 years now, 30 years now, of just the worst construction practices you could possibly imagine. But, at the end of the day, after we saved them and basically kind of redid them, now they're on the outside, they look nice and historic, and they're still there. And on the inside, they're as modern can be. They've got, footings that go down well below the frost depth. They've got, micropiles holding, parts that, were falling in place together and all that other stuff. But, if you wanted to look at it as an economically viable option, it was probably better just looking at at face value of this building. These buildings posed hazards of every possible idea of or example of the word hazard, and they should have been torn down. But we saved them and made them better. The question is did we do the right thing?
I think it's a tough question to answer, and every owner probably has to try and answer that question for themselves. Although I think many people, that question's out of their hands, right? Because it's the surrounding area, neighbors or city, that oftentimes feels they have a say in whether or not a building should be torn down or not. And so oftentimes it's not in your control. Although
right.
In the case of this Frank Lloyd Wright building, I suppose it was in his control to do that, although quite suspect to have it torn down in the middle of the night where nobody's paying attention. So,
he like I said, I personally feel like he totally had no intention of ever saving the building.
Maybe
he had a vision. I mean, if you just I'll put it in there. Just the, looking at his kind of like past developmental history, the guy never, hard worker. He, he knows what he wants to do. And I mean, the guy doesn't sound like a bad guy. It's just the guy he's got a vision, and nothing's going to kind of stop, nothing's really going to stop him from doing what he wants to do. And I don't think that he ever really had any intention of saving the building.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe not. I still think there's the bigger question is, should buildings, if there's some historical significance to them, or if there's not, should they be saved, or should we be paving over buildings, or, removing them, right? And I don't know. That's a tough question to answer.
I have, I don't know if this is, a parallel example or not, but one of my favorite buildings, one of my favorite architects, if I hadn't talked about it before, Evan, who's one of my favorite architects.
Oh, I thought you were saying I was. Sorry.
Well, other than you and Neil.
Oh, please.
Who's one of my favorite architects who did very few buildings on this coast, but did tons of buildings on your coast.
I don't know who you're talking about, man.
I have no idea.
Richard Neutra.
Oh, okay.
Oh.
Come on. You don't know me.
Now you're going to make me put a link in the show notes to him.
Anyway, so Richard Neutra, came over onto this side of the
youngster,
the world every once in a great while, and he did the Gettysburg cyclorama.
Mm-hmm.
As we all know, or if we don't know, the building is now demolished and gone. It sat I remember going to that building the first time I ever went to Gettysburg. That's where they had the big diorama of, like the Gettysburg battlefield, and then the gift shop and everything else. And they built a new one kind of off of the battlefield. This was perched right at the top of the hill on the battlefield, so that you went to the top. There was a terrace on the top, and you could overlook the battlefield. You could overlook kind of back where the encampments of the Northern Army was. You can see where the Pickett's charge happened, and all of these other things. And so the building was perfectly suited for the idea of being able to kind of get almost a bird's eye view of all of these different, sites. That even if you're standing on the ground of, at the top of the hill, you don't ever really get to see the same perspective as you did when you were, engaged with the building. Once they moved out of that building and had a nice new shiny gift shop with the IMAX movie theater and all that other stuff, it basically started to fall apart. Every time I went back there, and really I only went back there more because I just wanted to see the building than I wanted to, see Gettysburg. I mean, there's just so much of seeing the same thing over and over again. But I loved the building, and so every time we went back there, I always went back there as kind of to pay my little, homage to it. But anyway, so when they demoed it, or when they said that they were going to demo it, a lot of people were up in arms. Oh, this is, Richard Neutra. He's a very famous architect. Did very few buildings on the East Coast, and this is an example of one of them. It was kind of also, I believe it was part of that whole, what was it called? Mission 66.
Yeah.
So it was part of the whole mission. I believe it was part of the whole Mission 66 thing of like trying in all of these wonderful, beautiful, modern buildings all over the place in national parks and national battlefields and monuments and all that other stuff. So it has a very, architecturally, it's got a very rich history. And it was demolished because it was in the way of an even richer history, which was it stood in the middle of a battlefield where they wanted to restore the battlefield back to the day that the battle happened, and wanted to get rid of the building because it was in the way. Makes sense. ish. I wish they would have gotten rid of the parking lot that was adjacent to it, because that was just as much part of the battlefield as the building. But if they were going to mow the building down, then it made sense. But it's this kind of in the same realm as this. It was done by a famous architect. It was done by a famous architect who had very few buildings on this coast, and it was an example of a period of time in kind of America's. They were trying to bolster what was it, the kind of the spirit of America and all these national parks and stuff, and so it was part of that whole effort. So I mean, it had a lot of great history. Nobody saved it, because it was in the way, and I kind of feel like this is one of those cases. When you go to the battlefield now, you see the battlefield the way that you saw the battlefield, on the day that it was fought, and that was what their intention was. And so I kind of, as much as me personally, I'm sad that the building's gone, because I loved the building. I mean, it was just so cool. But it's gone, but it made sense to go. Yeah. And so that's, I guess I'm using it as an example of it makes sense to get rid of them when it makes sense. Mm-hmm. And when it doesn't make sense, and they do go, like this particular Frank Lloyd Wright one, it's just kind of a shame. It's kind of pointless. I mean, why get rid of them just because you can?
Yeah. Well, I'm sure a lot of our listeners have strong opinions one way or the other too. So it would be cool to kind of hear what. Maybe there's even somebody who's more familiar with this particular one than any of us are, which is zero.
Yeah.
We're not familiar at all. So that would be interesting to hear.
Yeah, I'd like to hear. I mean, I'm interested, with, because we've got, listeners all over the place. And, I'm just curious how other people treat historic landmarks, architectural landmarks, and what your thoughts are on, preserving them or demolishing them, or, I mean, the easy one is, you should just preserve it, and, if you want to change use. I mean, that's fine. I mean, that should sort of be, I mean, that's the lasting telling tale of like good architecture is, can you keep it around? Can you, do a little bit of adaptive reuse and do something else with it, but it's still around?
Well, it's more sustainable too. So
it's far more sustainable, yeah. But I'm more curious about, what happens when it's faced with, demolition? Mm-hmm. What is everybody else's take on it? That'd be, really interesting. So please go to our Twitter page, Facebook page, or wherever else page. Go to the comment section of our website and tell us what you think about it, because I'm interested.
Yeah.
Topic I love.
Clearly. That's great. All right, well, let's take us out with... No, damn it. Yeah.
Let's take us out, because since we've taken out...
Yes.
Since we've taken out a building, let's take us out.
I agree. Let's take this episode out. All right. So, this episode, I want to remind everybody, is brought to you by Arcat and BQE Core. The music is by System Kid. You can subscribe to Archispeak on Apple Podcasts or whichever podcast app you use. Be sure to check out our archive at archispeakpodcast.com, where you can stream or download every episode we've ever released and find links to the articles referenced in the episode. We can be found on Twitter and Facebook or via email at archispeakpodcast.com. Thanks for listening.
See ya.
Thank you very much. Bye.
Birthday candles, dismantle falls and pales me hard. I'm caught in a phone booth on the beach. You reach for your gun. Do I watch or run, or will someone call 911? Please. You were everything I wanted and more. Oh, and everything was magic and more. Went overboard. You beat your babies for needing you. Still, you hunger to conceive. A brand new pup might cuddle up, but he won't be enough. Your greed. I'm caught in a phone booth on the beach. You reach for your gun. Do I watch or run, or will someone call 911? Please. You were everything they needed and more. Oh, and everything was magic, but more. Went overboard. I hate the way that you lied to me. Still, I love you anyway. Because you tell me every little thing's gonna be